Thank you so much, Larry. Yeah, I used to always tell everybody that I had a seat on the New York Stock Exchange when I was 25, and then I was an investment banker for 14 years, and now I realize that I'm an antique because there aren't any investment bankers anymore. But clearly I have a thing for male-dominated institutions, having spent so much time on Wall Street and now the other place. But I really want to thank my friends here at the Center for American Progress. We try to whenever we're trying to do something that we think is impactful or important, we try to come here to do it. So we, of course, want to thank Winnie and John Podesta, and I want to thank my great friend Larry Korb, and I want to thank the CAPS media team for working with us. I see my friend and partner Aubrey Sarvis here, and David Stacy I think I saw here, and friends from HRC are being very, very supportive, and I want to thank them for their tireless advocacy for these issues. Because of SLDN's hard work and HRC's hard work, I am introducing my bill to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell with almost 112 co-sponsors this afternoon. We're going to have to actually wait till tomorrow because we're not going to be in session tonight because of the snow. But it's an honor to be here. I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about why I've decided to do it here and why it's important that we do this at this time. You know, CAP's work on this issue and others has been crucial in helping progressives develop a winning message and to get out there with confidence on things that haven't been talked about in quite a while. Your work here at CAP has been critical in 2008 and will remain important as we try to implement progressive change in 2009 and beyond. So I want to thank you, Winnie and John, for all your hard work. Let me start by saying what is, I think, obvious. I am enormously proud of our nation's military, their men and women who volunteer to leave the safety and comfort of their home, put themselves at risk, leave their jobs, leave their children, and serve our country under very, very difficult circumstances. No one that's in the military now is confused about the fact that they're going to have to take multiple tours to Iraq, Afghanistan, other places. It's a dangerous job. It is a time when we have an overstretched military, and I'm honored to represent a special place in California where Travis Air Force Base is located in my district. And I'm also honored to serve on the House Armed Services Committee, where I am the chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee. While the military's primary job is to fight wars, the military has also been a force for social change and upward mobility. Desegregation in the Army paved the way for racial integration that we see in the military today. By breaking down artificial barriers, women have refined their roles in the military, corporate America, and Congress. And my little time on Wall Street when I was a small child, I can tell you I know that firsthand. We have a military that is truly the finest in the world, but we must tear down one final last barrier. We need to end the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. To understand why we need to move forward, it's important to understand where we stand and where we have been truly at the center of injustice. Before World War II, the military had no official policy barring gay men and women from serving in the military. That does not mean that there was not any discrimination. It just means it wasn't official policy. In 1940, the War Department defined homosexual orientation as a psychiatric handicap and a disqualifying deviation. A soldier could get up to 12 years of military confinement and a dishonorable discharge. 40 years later, DoD policy stated that, and I quote, homosexuality was never compatible with military service, close quote. That rule was in effect until 1993, when President Clinton half fulfilled his promise to allow all people, quote, who wish to do so, to serve their country, close quote, and that the emphasis should be always on people's conduct, not their status. Well, that didn't exactly happen. Since its inception, Don't Ask, Don't Tell has discharged 12,500 qualified servicemen and women, many of whom possessed critical skills. The first 10 years of this policy alone cost the Department of Defense at least $363 million. And today, there are more than 1 million gay and lesbian veterans and at least 65,000 gay men and women who serve in fear of being harassed, embarrassed, and administratively discharged for simply being who they are. The Department of Defense needs to review this policy and the selective manner in which it has been implemented. Before the Korean War, the average number of discharges was 1,100 per year. During the war, this number dropped to 483 per year. The same thing happened during the Vietnam War. The average number of discharges dropped from 1,650 a year to 461 in 1970. More recently, the Department of Defense has invoked a policy called stop loss. The Defense Department relaxed a wide array of standards in order to recruit significantly more men and women and discharge fewer of them. The bottom line is that the Department has been running a system that allows it to ignore its own policy and then invoke it when it needs to. That is unacceptable. And together, we will change this. It is no longer a question of if we will change this law. It is just a question of when. Many have asked, why now? I have always said that there is no right time to right a wrong, that there is always time to right a wrong. We all have seen a sea change that reinforces this belief. When Don't Ask, Don't Tell became a policy, Colin Powell was one of the biggest champions. Now Secretary Powell and others like him, and including people like Senator Sam Nunn, 28 retired generals and admirals have called on the Pentagon to repeal the ban. More importantly, recent polling show that more than 70% of the troops who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan support lifting the ban. Quite simply, this is 2009, not 1993. So today, I am introducing the Military Readiness Enhancement Act. This bill will once and for all end the discriminatory practices of the Department of Defense, and men and women who have been administratively discharged would be allowed to have the opportunity to serve again if they want. I want to address critics who might argue that overturning the law that will lead to a lack of unit cohesion and an increase in assaults. First, in countries like England, Canada, Australia, and Israel, nothing of this sort has happened. Even though public opinion polls showed that lifting the ban in England would be unpopular, the military described it as a non-event. Second, I know that our men and women in uniform will comply with the laws we set forth if those laws are morally sound, clearly understood, and executed with purpose by everyone from the President as Commander-in-Chief to our lieutenants and non-commissioned officers. There is no evidence to support a continued ban on open service and every reason to allow lesbian and gay Americans to serve our country. Our troops are already serving with gay and lesbian colleagues without incident and are increasingly comfortable doing so. As someone who is concerned about building the strongest military possible and someone entrusted with promoting the best interests of the armed forces, I believe it is important to allow the Pentagon to recruit among the best and brightest Americans, regardless of sexual orientation. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to come here today, and I look forward to working with all of you to make sure that this legislation becomes law. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and once again, Dr. Frank, thank you so much for your very, very, very clear, cogent work.
Appreciate it.
You are a great ally for us to have out there in the real world, and I very much appreciate it.
As are you.
Thank you.
Okay, the floor is open for questions. Congressman, do you want to sit down or take
I'm
questions
fine.
standing up?
Yeah,
okay, fine.
I'm fine, thank you.
The floor is open for questions for Congresswoman Tauscher. Yes, sir.
Will O'Brien, Metro Weekly. First, I'm just curious to know what you're hearing from your constituents directly about this, either pro or con. And then relative to 93, how heated a fight are you expecting in Congress on this?
Right. Well, Will, I come from a part of the country where I'm blessed to work for the smartest people in the country. Not because they've elected me 7 times, although that is a nice coincidence, but it's just the truth. When I see people, I was home this weekend, when I see people in the Safeway or I'm at an event, probably, right now, 6 out of 10 people talk to me about the economy, mortgage foreclosures. It is very much of a domestic agenda. But maybe 1 out of 10 people comes up to me. More often, it's a mom that says to me, my son or daughter is gay or lesbian, and I'm so proud of what you're doing. I think that many people, my constituents and many people generally, don't understand why this law still exists. They consider it to be a dinosaur of civil rights legislation, and they think that something should have been done a while ago. I think that we have with the introduction of the legislation, the opportunity to do what we do best here in Washington, which is to inform people, to educate people, and to build the political will necessary to get things done. So last year, my great friend Susan Davis, who's the chairman of the Personnel Subcommittee, had the first hearing on Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 15 years. So there's an information gap. And for people that either haven't thought about it or don't want to think about it, and there's a lot of those, it's important that we do what we're supposed to do here in Washington. So we will have hearings. We will have different opportunities for people to understand how things have changed in the time. But there are some facts that are very clear. Certainly Colin Powell, who was the physical embodiment of the opposition in 1993, has come to our side and said that he believes that this law should be changed. We have a number of flag officers, most of them retired, who have said that they believe it should be changed. We have allies, 26 countries, and some of our biggest allies in the world all have this policy for no repercussions. And the American people now, well over 75% of them. In 1993, it was 50-50. It's now 75% of the American people believe that this is the wrong policy and it should be changed. So what you have to do is knit all of this together in a way where you can get 218 votes in the House and 60 votes in the Senate. And we have the one thing that we've needed for a long time, which is a president that will sign it. If you remember back during the debates when we had a number of candidates, there was one time when there were 6 or 7 of them on the stage and the press asked the question and every hand went up immediately. Would you sign the repeal, Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And they all said yes. So we finally have the alchemy has come together for us where we have all the pieces that we need. And now we have to galvanize the will of the American people through their representation here in Washington, House of Members, Senate members. And we have to pass it and get it to the president. And the president, as commander-in-chief, will make the decision when that happens.
Okay. Next question. Yes.
Hi, my name's Stephen from Senator Conrad's office. And before you arrived, we talked very briefly about framing the issue and issues of civil rights against military readiness. I was wondering, in light of what seemed like pretty compelling arguments in terms of military readiness, how do you think the opposition will frame their arguments? And do you think that those cultural issues will come to the fore, or do you think they'll keep trying to talk about cohesion and so on?
Well, sometimes you're blessed by the opponent that you have in a debate, and I think that our opponents, frankly, have stale old arguments that were perhaps politically compelling in 1993 and caused this to be a half measure called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, not a full repeal. But I think that what we have are the facts on our side, and I think that there is a duality in this debate. I tend, as Dr. Frank mentioned, I tend to talk about this as a civil rights debate. I think that it is much more compelling for average Americans, considering the fact that the military right now, as Larry knows, is based on mostly it's a family business. Lots of people in the military are, especially those that are in active duty now and make it a career, their father, their grandfather, they have family business. And so for them, it's an argument also of unit cohesion and other things, because the constituency in this debate is not just the American people, although they have the biggest megaphone and the biggest voice and the biggest vote. There are other constituencies that we want to satisfy. And in satisfying them, that does not mean that we bend over backwards or we retreat. It means that we keep the information in a way that they can that can be presented to them that is about them. So it's not just the American people. It's retired military veterans. It's military families. It's people that are supporters of the military. So we have a number of ways of sending the message out. But I believe that it's primarily a civil rights debate. We can expect that our opponents are going to try to fearmonger about unit cohesion and things like that, which frankly, that's fine. The American people don't understand what that means. For them, it's that's a theoretical. I'm happy to talk to them about the reality. And I think that we'll get pretty far answering the questions that they bring forward, which I think are fear-mongering, and I think that we can make the debate about civil rights, which is what it really is.
Next question. Let me raise a question. And before you come in, somebody raised a question. Given all of the, and you referred to it in terms of, the right time, given all of the other issues on the nation's plate, are you worried that this will get lost or that people can't give it the attention that they should?
Well, that's why it's an American woman introducing it, because we can multitask. It's a great question. Look, we've all got our hair on fire about 7 or 8 things at once. I think that clearly what's important here, and that's why I try to structure the debate to be not if this is going to happen, it's going to happen. And actually when is not even an issue as far as I'm concerned. The question, I think, really is how. And because there has been so much personal damage done, because there has been such a denigration of people and who they are, I'd like to add a little class to the debate. And I think class always works. My mother tells me it does, and I believe her. And I think we're going to try to keep it up here. We're going to try to keep it a debate about the issues, and we're not going to get pushed around by the bigots on their side, the opponents that want to make this a fear-mongering debate. So once we've settled on that, the question of how is important, and the question of how is a political question, and the question of how and when, I believe really needs to be driven by what the Commander-in-Chief's decisions are about what the priorities are going forward. Clearly, we're going to have troops coming out of Iraq. I think the President's message on that this last weekend is very, very good. And I think he's not only keeping his promise, but he's doing it in the kind of responsible way that the American people want. We're going to be putting more troops into Afghanistan. That region is, I was there in September. Pakistan is the most dangerous place in the world, and Afghanistan is, of course, suffering from all of that. So the question of how and when is really it, and I think it's got a lot to do with what we can do to make the case. So having hearings and doing the things that we're supposed to do in regular order are important, building the case and building the momentum. But in the end, I believe working with President Obama and Speaker Pelosi and Harry Reid, we can then make a decision on when we bring this to a vote. And, if we get to 218 in the House, we may take it first and then let the Senate act. But I think that, once again, it's about building political momentum. It's about making our case. It's about disabling the arguments that our friends on the other side are going to make and put them where they belong. And then have it ready for a queuing time when somebody in our leadership says, now's the time to go. This is what the White House says we should be doing. So I think I'm very confident. Now, if you ask me when it's going to happen, I will tell you that we need time. We need time to build a political debate in the House and get the number of sponsors that we need. We have a number of people in the Senate that I think we would like to have as a sponsor. We haven't gotten there yet. So, there's a lot of time for us to move forward, but I think that we should be confident that it is going to happen. And I think that we should be confident that we're not only going to win the debate, but we're going to win the tenor of the debate, too, which is always good for us.
Dr. Frank has a question for
Yes.
As someone who has studied this issue a lot, it's hard for me to imagine that more research would be needed as an important part of this. But certainly hearings is a form of research. I'm just wondering, some people in the White House have suggested that a study commission be appointed, and I'm wondering if you think that's an important way to go as part of building the case.
Well, what I've suggested is that we do 3 things, and I made this suggestion last year, and I think the White House does believe it's the right thing to do. I think that as we have we're building, we have time to build the political consensus in the House and the Senate. There are things that we can be doing in parallel that will greatly add our ability to make the arguments to the different constituencies. I do think that the President could empower the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs to respond to a question. Now, considering that this is the law, the military leadership can only respond to a certain kind of question. The President could hypothetically ask Admiral Mullen, how would you implement the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And I also think that it would be a very good idea to have an independent commission headed by somebody like, Colin Powell, where you had a number of people that had, flag officers that had served and non-commissioned officers that had served, where you gave them 6 months, 8 months maybe, to look at the different intricacies of the different services specific to living arrangements, housing, things that are going to be potential issues where they have to, where we have to ask and answer. And I think that could come, toward the end of this year. And I think those two things specifically could lay the groundwork for the kind of information that we also want, and also to build the case that there is a very broad group of people that believe that this should be changed, and that there are people that have real experience in the military.
I have a question up here. Comes the mic.
Thank you. Yes, Bob Miller. We were talking a few moments ago about the moral argument that has not really been illuminated very richly. What do you expect to hear, or what have you heard from the church, even your own church, on this?
Well, I'm not a practicing Catholic. I still have my faith, but I don't ascribe to many of the practices of the church, and it's a moral issue for me to be in a church that I think is so misogynistic. So I have a problem with my church leadership, but I still consider myself a practicing Catholic in my own way. So I don't have any. They don't influence me on these things, and while I listen respectfully as best I can, I know what they're going to be telling me. So that's the way that is. I think the moral issue is very clear. I believe that this is one of the last civil rights battles that we have in this country. And I think that it is a stain on our souls as Americans to be in the 21st century and have this kind of discrimination institutionalized by the government. And I think that it's important that we stand up for our friends and family members and good Americans that want to serve. And I think that that we will prevail on this. But I think the moral argument is a civil rights argument, and I think it's an important one. I think it's also very important to make sure that the American people understand who these people are. They've been created as an abstract for too many people. They certainly were an abstract in 1993. And I think that, time has worked for us. These men and women are not abstracts anymore. They're people in everyone's family. They're people in everyone's community. They're people in everyone's church. They're people in everyone's high school class, college class, people you know at work. So I think that we've been aided in this time, although it's taken too long, by the fact that this is now personal. I think that's why the American people marched right to 75% and they're not going from 75 to 60, they're going to 75 to 80. And it's because the bigotry and the fear-mongering that was about this debate for too long has been nullified by people's personal experience. And I think, frankly, that's part of what the awakening of General Powell, as he has described it. So, I think that we have the angels on our side to the extent that we want them, and we've got the message on our side, and I think we've got right on our side. And that's why, it's always a good time to right or wrong.
I might mention we were going to have one of those warriors here today who's openly gay. Unfortunately, they couldn't get in because of the plane was canceled. But again, I think to humanize this situation, I think is very, very important rather than just talking in these abstract principles, because as Dr. Frank has pointed out, and my own experience tells me, they've always served the country.
Yes,
I mean, this is really not what we're talking about.
Some of them are in the audience that appear in my book also, so they are represented here today.
Okay. Do we have time for one final question? Oh, okay. Well, you haven't had a question, so go ahead, young lady. Make away from the mic.
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I'm an intern for the U.S. Public Service Academy, which is a piece of legislation that Representative Moran is going to be introducing very soon. Basically, what our legislation does is create a civilian West Point to build up our workforce of public leaders, not just our military servicemen and women. And one of the things that we talk about when we're on the Hill is how many young people this is going to attract who want to serve the country but not in the military. So we think, well, especially young women and members of the gay and lesbian community, will flock to, and they'll apply in decently large numbers. But my question, maybe for the whole panel, is, so with the repeal that's going to happen, how long do we think it'll take before we start seeing large numbers entering of the gay and lesbian community entering the military in large numbers? When is that culture shift, as you discussed earlier? What has to happen for that?
Well, I just remind you that it's always been happening. It will continue to happen. There is research out of UCLA that estimates that several thousand more gay and lesbian service members each year will consider joining and join, and that could happen right away. But you're right to see that there's a cultural phenomenon, and cultural shifts take time. I don't think it will take too much time, though. Again, this is about law and rhetoric catching up with reality that's already out there, and I think it's great to offer all Americans both the civilian service idea and military service.
And let me say something, and I'll give Congresswoman Tauscher the last word. It's going to be a non-issue. I mean, when this is all over, we're going to say, my goodness, what were we so worried about? Because, A, they've always been there, okay? Most of the people there know it and don't care.
Right.
So
I think what you will find is, I think that Dr. Frank and Larry are right. I think what you'll find is all of a sudden the ranks of the military will have gay and lesbian people that have been serving. And all of a sudden people will realize that. And for people that are serving with them, it's not an issue, by and large. But I'm interested in what you just said. I think muscularizing our soft power is a great idea. And I think, it must be Jim Moran. Yeah, and he's a great friend of mine, and we need to have as many ways for American people to serve as possible, and the military obviously is specific to what its roles and missions are, and what we're going to ask of them. But I think what you're doing is very, very interesting, and I'm glad to see that you're leading the way on that. But I thank all of you. We have to. We have to stay together as we have. I want to thank, HRC and SLDN for their leadership. They've been just absolutely fabulous. And I see my friend Mike Berman back there, and I see Barry Carter. I want to thank all of you for your support. It's been great to be, Marty Meehan first introduced this, and then he left to go to the University of Massachusetts, and I took this on, and it's been a passion of mine for a very long time. But it's an honor for me to be the original co-sponsor of this bill. So I appreciate your support and all of your influence, and just help us get it done. Thank you.
And it was an honor to have you and Nathaniel here today, and all of you. So thank you very much for coming. We look forward to seeing you in the future.